Help me hit 7,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and share your thoughts in the comments. I read everyone. Thank you. I never expected my life to change with a single text, but there it was, glowing on my phone screen like an alarm I didn't want to hear. Explanation later, it said. Nothing else. No warning, no context, just 4 words that carried the weight of months. Maybe years of distance I hadn't fully noticed until that moment. My name is Oliver. I'm 39. I've been married to Clara for 14 years, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I realized how little I truly knew about what she was thinking. Clara has always been spirited, vivacious, even a little impulsive at times. She can light up a room without trying. But over the last several months, I noticed subtle shifts. She'd been quieter during dinner, distracted on our walks, sometimes staring at the ceiling as if the air itself held secrets she wasn't ready to share. I told myself it was stress from her new role at the design firm. I told myself it wasn't me. But that message, that 4-word sentence, broke the illusion. I looked at the text again, then slowly, deliberately, I typed, "Excellent. My lawyer will listen." I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel fear. I felt clarity, the kind of clarity that sneaks up on you quietly, leaving a hollow space in its wake. Not panic, not shock, just a sober understanding that the ground beneath me had shifted, and I had to figure out how to stand firmly on it. Clara and I have always been meticulous planners. Every anniversary, every birthday, even little weekend trips we orchestrated together. But lately, those plans had become automatic, predictable, hollow. I realized I had been holding on to tradition, to routine, to the idea of us, while she had already begun to drift somewhere I couldn't reach. I remember that night vividly, our 15th wedding anniversary. I had spent hours preparing her favorite dinner, the kind of meal she once loved. But when she arrived home, she barely looked at the table, barely smiled. She barely looked at me. I brushed off the sting, pretending to see the Clara I once knew. She was sipping wine, her eyes flicking to her phone repeatedly. I kept conversation light, but every question I asked seemed to hang in the air unanswered, swallowed by her silence. That night I went to bed alone, not physically but emotionally. I realized then that something had changed irreversibly. Something invisible had fractured. In the days that followed, she was more distant than ever. Texts were curt, calls were brief. Our interactions had become mechanical, shared responsibilities, grocery runs, and the occasional passing acknowledgement. The warmth, the subtle intimacy, the shared jokes had all vanished. And then came the text. Explanation later. I spent hours walking through the apartment, feeling the quiet weight of it. It wasn't just the message. It was everything it represented. Her withdrawal, her choice to distance herself, the unspoken truth I couldn't reach. I began to replay every interaction from the past few months. Every half-smile, every glance away, every sigh that felt heavier than necessary. And then I understood this wasn't about one argument, one mistake, or one off day. This was a culmination, a slow, almost imperceptible unraveling of the connection I thought was unbreakable. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table, my laptop open, not to scroll social media or check emails, but to do something I had never imagined needing. I searched for the best family and divorce lawyers in our city. I wanted guidance, clarity, and most importantly, to understand my options before emotions dictated my actions. I wasn't angry at Clara, at least not yet, but I was aware of my own boundaries and my own self-respect. I needed to know what steps to take if the drift I'd been ignoring for so long wasn't reversible. By the time Clara returned that night, I had crafted a mental plan. I wasn't going to confront her, beg for explanations, or plead for reassurance. I would act with measured calm, the kind that comes from understanding your own worth and refusing to let uncertainty control your actions. When she entered, carrying her usual lightness that now felt foreign, I simply nodded, acknowledging her presence without seeking permission or forgiveness. Her eyes flicked toward the table. "Dinner's ready," I said calmly. She paused, glanced at the untouched meal, and then at me. She didn't respond. I didn't press. I poured myself a glass of water and sat down, pretending normalcy, though every fiber of me knew that our normal was gone. Later, as she went to her office to check emails, I picked up my phone again, revisiting the message. For simple words. But in them, I recognized the end of the story I thought we were still writing together. It was a strange, almost paradoxical feeling, relief mingled with loss. I wasn't panicked, I wasn't frantic. I felt awake, hyper-aware of the emptiness she had been cultivating around me, of the invisible walls she had built. And in that space I found a small, quiet sort of strength. I realized that no matter what explanations might come later, no matter what reasons she had, I had begun a journey toward reclaiming control over my life. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual, the apartment unusually quiet. Clara was still asleep, or perhaps she had retreated entirely into her own world, the one I hadn't been invited to for months. I made coffee, the familiar aroma oddly comforting, and sat by the window, thinking about the text again. Explanation later. She had chosen silence over conversation, distance over intimacy, and in that choice, she had revealed more than any words could. By mid-morning, her phone buzzed constantly with notifications, work, social media, messages from friends, but she ignored each one. She was distant, present only in body, absent in spirit. I realized then that I had been clinging to illusions, hoping for sparks that would never return. And so I made a decision. I would no longer wait for explanations, apologies, or validation. I would move forward on my own terms, calmly and deliberately. I spent the day organizing my affairs, not recklessly, not vindicatively, but methodically. I reviewed our finances, our shared accounts, and even our shared subscriptions. Every decision I made was measured, designed to reflect my own boundaries and self-respect. It wasn't revenge, it was clarity. I wanted to ensure that whatever came next, I remained in control of my own life, my own choices, my own dignity. When Clara returned that evening, she seemed different, almost cautious. Perhaps she realized I had changed, that my calm response to her abrupt text had shifted the power dynamics subtly but unmistakably. She glanced at me, then down at the table. I met her eyes, steady, unflinching, and said nothing. I didn't need to. The silence itself spoke volumes. She opened her mouth, paused, and closed it again. No explanations, no excuses, just the same distance she had cultivated over months. In the days that followed, I consulted with a lawyer, a professional who helped me understand my rights, my responsibilities, and the options available to me. The clarity this brought was almost intoxicating. For years, I had prioritized others, Clara, family, work over myself. Now, I could see a path forward, one defined by self-respect, dignity, and emotional equilibrium. During one of our brief, tense conversations, Clara finally attempted to speak about the future. But I realized I no longer needed her reasoning to validate my choices. Her explanations, if they ever came, would not dictate my actions. I had already decided. I would protect myself emotionally, legally, and financially, and I would not allow uncertainty to compromise my peace. It wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt, pangs of longing for the life we had shared, flashes of memory that felt warm and tender. But those moments were fleeting. I reminded myself that love cannot survive in isolation, cannot thrive where respect and communication are absent. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, I began to feel a strange kind of liberation, the freedom that comes from accepting reality without resentment, from acting with intention rather than reaction. One evening, I was sitting on the balcony, watching the city lights twinkle against the dark sky. Clara passed by the living room, glanced at me briefly, then disappeared into her office. The house, once a shared space, felt empty, but not in a painful way. It felt like a canvas, blank and ready for the next chapter of my life. I realized then that endings can carry their own form of peace, a quiet understanding that life moves forward, whether we are ready or not. Weeks later, the formal proceedings began. Through lawyers, we navigated the legalities, dividing assets, and clarifying responsibilities. I approached each conversation with calm determination, never allowing emotion to cloud judgment. Each step reinforced a growing truth. Independence does not come from anger or revenge. It comes from clarity, preparation, and acceptance. Clara and I eventually met in the lawyer's office to finalize agreements. There were no dramatic confrontations, no shouting matches. Just two people acknowledging a relationship that had run its course. As we shook hands, I felt a sense of closure I had never imagined possible months earlier. No bitterness, no lingering resentment. Only the quiet strength that comes from honoring yourself and your boundaries. That night, I returned home, alone but at peace. I poured a glass of wine, sat in the living room, and reflected on the past weeks. The message explanation later had once felt like a blow, an impossibly heavy weight. But it had also been a catalyst, forcing me to see reality clearly, to act decisively, and to reclaim my life with dignity. I realized that sometimes the hardest moments are the ones that teach us the most. I didn't need explanations, and she didn't owe me any. What mattered was my response, my choices, and my sense of self. I had navigated the silence, the absence, and the uncertainty, and emerged stronger, calmer, and more aware of what I deserved. Life was still unfolding, unpredictable as ever, but for the first time in a long time, I felt entirely in control. Not over her, not over the circumstances, but over myself. And in that control, I found freedom.